What's up? I'm Tristan. This video is specifically for people who work a 9-to-5 job and want to start their own business, or who already have their own business and they're trying to figure out how to transition into just working their full-time business and no more 9-to-5. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna use these 3 different formulas that I specifically used to quit my job, so that I wasn't just like jumping ship. It was like, jumping off the ship onto the dock, like just walking onto the dock, rather than, just diving off the cruise ship. And so like, just as a quick overview, this is like roughly what we're gonna go over. How I laid out my expenses, subtracting out my wife's income is the needed income that I needed to make per month. And then I would take my needed income, multiply it by 6. So I had 6 months of savings. That was my target market so I could quit my job. And then I take my wife's income, subtract out the expenses, and then there's a negative at the bottom. And that negative is how Adams Realty Group pays Tristen Adams. So an entity, my business, pays me so that I can, live. And this is my personal. The first thing I want to know was my burn rate. My burn rate is essentially how much money I'm making divided by how much money I have in my bank account. So if I have $1,000 in my bank account and I spend $100 a month, I have a 10-month burn rate. And so I need to write down all of my expenses, every single one of them. So I literally started with my rent or your mortgage, all my utilities, an average of my utilities, an average of my internet and phone, if that's variable for you, mine are fixed. I wrote down how much I pay for my car note, the average of my gas, and I went back on all my bank statements and decided like this is roughly how much I spend in gas for every month. My insurance is all the same, tithing / giving, whatever you decide to do, investments, student loans, credit cards, personal loans, personal money, fund money, food, and miscellaneous groceries. And then what I did is I cut out as much fat as possible. And so for me, I'm gonna tell you what I do. Me, I rent an apartment, my utilities are somewhat fixed. Internet and phone, those are as cheap as they can get. Like I have the cheapest stuff. Car note, that's like a recurring expense. Gas, I'm not gonna be traveling as much because I'm working so hard because I'm trying to quit my job. Insurance, that stays the same. Tithing, 10% right off the top of every single paycheck. I firmly believe that if you are to give the first fruits of everything that you produce, your vats will be overfilled with wine. Proverbs 3:10. Investments, I personally don't invest in anything. I believe in the ideology of S&Me 500, which I heard from Alex Ramosi, but essentially it's, if you invest in a Roth IRA or stocks over the course of your life, like 30, 40 years, you'll have anywhere from like $2 to $10 million. I truly believe that if I just use all the money I can now to build the businesses that I want to build, that I'll have way more than $10 million. So I'm just going to keep all my money now. For you, you might want to invest. I don't know what you want to do. That's just what I do. Student loans, I graduated debt free, but write them down. Credit cards, I don't believe in credit cards. I think they're evil. I'm a Dave Ramsey nerd. I cut them up. I don't have any. I've never owned a credit card. Personal loans, never done a personal loan. If you got it, write it down. Personal money. Personal money is like what me and my wife can decide to use however we want. Do we want to buy a Snickers bar? Do we want to buy a new backpack? Our finances are one. Again, I'm a huge Dave Ramsey nerd. So at the very end, whenever we're subtracting out expenses, we also subtract out like, hey, you have $100, I have $100, so that we can spend it however we want because it's just peace of mind. If you're married, you know exactly how I feel. Okay, so fun money. There is no time for fun money because I'm working so much to work for a better future, which is quitting my job. So honestly, I just cut out fun money. That was the first thing I did, is I realized I can cut out that fat immediately. Don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I'm not gonna re-record this one. I actually forgot about subscriptions. This is like Hulu, Netflix, Chegg, Course Hero, a Wall Street Journal, this and that, and this gym membership, like all this stuff. We have Netflix, Hulu, and Peacock, and that's it. Everything else is like completely cut out. We don't even have TV, obviously, because streaming platforms are way better. So half of this crap just got completely cut out. Food, we don't eat out except for on the weekends, and it's very, very, very minimal. And that's gonna be cutting out most of that budget there. Miscellaneous, I put down because that's gonna be like razors, deodorant, body wash. You gotta smell good. So for me, I was able to cut out investments. I was able to cut out student loans because I don't have those. Credit cards don't have those. Personal loans don't have those. And most of the personal money, we kept some personal money for like sanity reasons, but you can cut out personal money because you don't even have time to spend it if all you're doing is working, right? So that leaves you with most of these like very fixed expenses. Even gas, like I could cut gas just a little bit because I'm not gonna be traveling as much because I'm just trying to keep my expenses low so that when I quit my job, it's not stressful. Okay, so then after I figured out all of my expenses, let's just pretend it was $500 total. This is just for laughs. My total monthly household budget for expenses was 500 bucks. I'm gonna erase the board and write the next thing. I'll be right back. Okay, so once I figured out exactly what my expenses were, the rest of this equation kind of works itself out. So then I can, subtract out my expenses and put in a finite number of 500. And I know how much my wife makes because she's on salary. So then I can obviously put in my wife's income, which I guess I could have done from the start, but it doesn't really matter. So let's say she makes $200. Well, that tells me that the income that I need to produce monthly, if I were to quit my job, would need to be $300. But then I wanted to make sure that I'm making $300 consistently every month, because I might have a really good month and make $400 in one month, but then go 3 more months without making any money. So that's $400 divided by 4 months. That's only $100 a month. It needs to be consistently at least $300 a month. So then to figure out how much I need to quit my job, I can plug in my needed income into here. So then it's just $300 times 6 months means that if I have $1,800 in a separate savings account that is just used to pay myself, that means I can live for 6 months without receiving any paycheck, which gives me a firm sense of security before just jumping ship. It's more of just like walking off the ship onto the dock. Because remember, before I quit, I made sure I was consistently making at least $300 a month. More than that, because I don't want to just quit my job to go back into the rat race. I want to quit my job to like grow more wealth. And the only way to do that is to obviously keep my expenses low so that my needed income stays low, so that anything on top of my needed income that I make just goes into the bank account and I get rich, right? So now once I got $1,800 in my bank account, that's when I quit my job. And that was April 7th of 2024. Quit my job, and that's when I went full-time real estate. So then this created a whole different situation in like how I budget, because I used to always budget like my salary and my wife's salary together is one big number, and then I would subtract out my expenses, and then like that bottom number is what we would save. Now I do like kind of like a backwards budget where I start with my wife's income, I subtract out my expenses, and that's how much I pay myself. So I'll show you. So obviously it's just gonna be a different way of writing that top line. Okay, so then for example, let's use the same example up here. My wife makes 200, my expenses are 500. So that means I'm negative 300 every paycheck or every month, right? So that's just how much I pay myself. You're like, how do I pay myself? And that's what I'm gonna show you in a second, how I set up my business banking account and then my personal banking account so that I could pay myself. So in this theoretical example, I pay myself only $300 per month, and that's it. That's all that goes into our personal accounts that we can spend. Everything else is gonna stay in that business account so that it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, because that's the money that we're gonna use to like actually build wealth. My business is gonna make us wealth. We're not gonna save our way to wealth. And so that means I'm just gonna pay myself the bare minimum. I'm gonna keep my expenses low. Even though I'm making a ton of money, I'm just gonna stay living like I'm poor or broke so that I can keep stacking cash in this business banking account that I'm gonna show you in just a second. Okay, so then this is me setting up the business banking account. I have a personal account that'll go there in just 1 second, but for the purposes of this video, this is just my business bank account. Let's pretend in the whole month, I made $2,500, hypothetically, right? I'm gonna put $2,500 at the top, and I'm gonna subtract out all my expenses, all of them, staples, paper, chair, gas, like every business expense that I can think of. And to keep the numbers easy, just pretend it's 500 bucks. With that 500 bucks taken out of the equation, I'm gonna have 2,000 bucks left. I'm gonna take out 30% for taxes. That might be too much, but I don't care. I'd rather have too much for the KGB or the IRS than too little. I'm gonna take out that $600 and put that into a different savings account, which is gonna be my tax account, so that at the end of the year, I have a huge number of taxes that I'm just gonna pay off to the IRS. So that's gonna leave me with $1,400 of like usable money, like money that I can actually touch. So from that $1,400, I'm gonna take out 10% right off the top, and that's gonna be tithing. I'm gonna put that into a whole nother account that's gonna be given away to my church. After I've done all the subtraction, I have that $1,260 left at the end of the month for my business. What do I do with that money? How do I separate it? What do I do? And that's what I'm gonna show you in a second. I have to draw it out, so I'll be right back. Okay, so the last thing that you saw was only this number, $1,260. Well, remember at the end of the month, my personal banking account, now Tristen Adams, like this bank, my business bank is Adams Realty. It's an entity. Adams Realty Group pays Tristen Adams. So the business banking account pays my personal account. Like I'm an employee of my own business, essentially. Now remember, my personal banking account, wife's income, WI, she makes 200. I subtract out my $500 of expenses. That means I'm negative $300 for the month. Where does that money come from? Well, that comes from the money that I made at Adams Realty Group. so that $300 gets put in, so that now we can add $300 so that we just have a zero-based budget. And then now there's no problems, right? So then you're like, well, man, where does that rest of the money go? Because I only took out $300 from the 1260. So now that leaves us with the 960. So I put it into two different buckets. I split this into my business checking account and my retained earnings, which is a fancy way of saying business savings account. You'll notice that my business checking account is $500 and my savings only gets $460. Why is that? Well, remember, my expenses from my actual business was $500. So if I put $500 into my business checking account, then I won't have a cash flow problem. And then when next month comes around and I have to buy staples or a chair or gas, I have money ready to go, loaded on my card, so that I don't have to pull out of my savings. So then the rest of this money, the other $460, goes into my savings. This is what I consider like actual profit. And this is the number that I want to actually grow. And so I'm gonna do everything in my power to never touch this. And this money is gonna be used to create wealth for my personal, like my family, or maybe I'm gonna be able to buy a really cool opportunity in real estate because someone needs the cash. Maybe this number grows so high that I can, buy into an investment property or I can buy into a business. Like, this is really the bread and butter. This is the number that actually matters to me. Everything else I could care less about. All I care about is zeroing out my personal number, and I'm just gonna live the same life, same expenses. I'm gonna grow this number by keeping my business expenses down to the best of my ability. I'm not gonna have a cash flow problem because I'm paying myself first, right? So like, this is how I run the business. And there's probably people ahead of me that have a much better system laid out, but this system makes sense to me. Like it's so visually laid out in my head. This is exactly what it looks like in my head. It's so easy to understand. And that's all I care about. I'm not so high up to where I have to nickel and dime and you're like, what bank account do I find that's gonna give me the best interest rate on my savings? Like this one has 2%, this one has 5% savings. I don't care about any of that. Like that 3% extra savings that I'm gonna get is not gonna matter in the grand scheme of things. If I can just make my business better and make this number 3,500, 4,500 and keep my expenses the same, that makes this number so much bigger. And that's all I care about. I might be able to be a little bit more efficient with some other things and blah, 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 but all I care about is just making my business better so that this number grows. Because if this number grows and this number stays the same, then that number grows. And that's the number that I actually care about. So you don't have to have all this figured out, because I didn't have all this figured out. I figured it out along the way, and hopefully this video helps. Like I laid it out as perfectly as possible. The only thing that really matters is just keeping your expenses low. Just because you're making a lot more money does not give you the right to go out and buy this fancy new car because it's gonna make everyone think that you're so much better. I pull up to $1 million listing appointments in that car because I could care less. If they're not gonna use me because of my car, I don't wanna work with them anyways. Like, it doesn't really matter. Just keep your expenses low, because if you keep your expenses low, this number is gonna grow so big. And it's so tempting because this number gets large and you're like, man, this is my time to go buy a Corvette or go buy this fancy new car to impress other people. But like, so what? Those other people who have those really nice cars, they're always stuck in this rat race because they make $2,500 and they spend $2,500. So they're never gonna have this. And when that really cool opportunity comes up for you to purchase this $500,000 house for $300,000 because they really, really need the money, you can't. You don't have that money because you haven't had the discipline to put money into your retained earnings. And that's what I'm waiting for. When preparation meets opportunity, True Kathy said, be ready for unexpected opportunities. And this is me being ready. I'm preparing every single day. So the call to action is, if you haven't quit your job, figure out your expenses, figure out what it's gonna take for you to save up 6 months worth of expenses, to jump ship, and then figure out how you can keep your expenses low so that you can start growing in your business. Oh, actually, before I go, it really does help if you like and subscribe, helps the algorithm, makes me look good. Also, every Monday from 10:30 to 11:30, I host a sales call. It's a very sales-oriented call. In the last 15 minutes of the call, you can ask me questions and answers, but it helps some people. Some people find it valuable, some people don't. I don't really care. Tune in if you can. My name's Tristen, I'm out.